Good evening. My name is Eric Stith with a Hand Up Recovery Home, and I just want to thank our CEO, Wilbur Cook, for allowing me to invite Pastor Eric Crawford this evening.
Thank you.
Talk about his programs, actually. I've known Eric Crawford, pastor, for quite a while. He has a recovery program that helps a lot of folks in the North Lawndale area, near Roosevelt and Pulaski. Talk about your program, Pastor.
Hey, first of all, I want to thank you and my brother, Reverend Cook, for inviting me out here to speak on the programs of recovery. One of the programs that we have is a recovery ministry, and what that entails is the 12-step ministry. We incorporate the 12-step concept with the biblical concepts, and we have that meeting. And then from that group, we also do a outreach program on Friday nights where we feed the community, and we in collaborations with the Firehouse ran by Phil Jackson, who support our programs. And what we do, we go out on the street corners, mostly the hottest spot, Roosevelt and Pulaski.
And
we give them, we cook hamburgers and hot dogs, chips, and give them water. But we also give them literature, and we pray with them and give them basically just encouragement or some clear-cut instructions on, how to change their lives. And that's one of the programs that we started up and running. We also have a program on every third Wednesday. It's called the Parent Healing Program. Now, the Parent Healing Program is a program that responding to the atrocities of the parents who lost their children, because to every child or to every gun violence that you hear, there are two parents that are suffering in silence. Dealing with that issue. And so we have that program where we have professionals to be available if anyone needed, but it's mainly a peer, a group where individuals come together who have addressed this issue and healed a little bit better so they can begin to help other people. And lastly, we have a men's program where the men come together and talk about issues, especially for, Eric, like in the African American community years ago, we wasn't allowed to really express our emotions on a personal level. If something was wrong with us, we was told stuff like a man ain't supposed to cry, we're not supposed to operate out of feelings.
What goes on in this
house?
Stays in this house, right?
Yeah, and all of those things. And what happens is that because we're not allowed to express our feelings and emotions, even in the here and now by our family, our friends, our society, they don't allow men to express their true feelings, because it kind of lets or give them the impression that there's a form of weakness. And so what happens is that we begin to suppress those feelings. And once a feeling is suppressed, what happens on the inside, it begins to implode. And then you'll find a lot of anger, a lot of resentments, a lot of built-in issues that we deal with. And so this men group allow us to address the anger, whether it's justified or not, address the resentments, address the grudges, address and express how we really feel. It is said that we're not supposed to be like angry black men, but there's a lot of anger inside of men because we're not allowed to express our feelings and emotions.
Thank God for Bill W. and his 12-step program that allows folks to encourage people to share their feelings and emotions, to get those resentments out and to write about them and to talk to somebody else, a mentor, about those feelings and emotions, actually. So your Lawndale Lighthouse Wellness Program, you've got a center at 1252 South Pulaski?
Yes, at 1252 South Pulaski is a program we just obtained last year. We completed the remodeling and we opened it up for services as April of this year.
Okay.
And so we put in the programs in there, because what we find is that if we're dealing with, we have a open meeting. That's for anyone who want to come in. And so our church is actually inside a Chicago Christian, West Side School. And you don't want to interact.
Collaborating.
You don't want to interact people with the children because
Students.
you know them, but you really don't know them. And so just for safety precautionary, we start at 6 o'clock, which is after the school is out and all the children is gone.
Okay.
And we also decided to go over to another building so we can begin to expand because there's a lot of flexibility, anonymity, and a whole lot of reasons why we should, keep a person's personal life private.
So you've got two buildings, the Lawndale Lighthouse building and the Lawndale Wellness Center building, I believe.
Yes. But we actually, network with three. All of the programs, there's a youth program, the Wyman program, which is the Young Men Educational Network program, the Chicago Christian School program, Westside, and then they have the Lawndale Lighthouse CRC church, and it was in a church building. And so what the church did was sold the building at 1241 to the Wyman Center. Instead of building a mega church, where they just built the school and put the church in there, which is very that was a smart move. Then that way.
Unique strategy.
We have a opportunity to continue to provide services for the youth as well as the church, and we could multitask within the same facility.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So a hand-up recovery program located at 4032 West Van Buren. So we focus mainly from Madison and Pulaski back to Roosevelt, actually. And then sounds like your program at Roosevelt and Pulaski covers back down the whole. So we're kind of focusing on the whole area that's impacted by gun violence.
Well,
talk about some of the success stories, if any.
Well, yeah. Well, some of the success stories, I mean, we could talk about success stories all the time, but I want to, when we mentioned about gun violence, and
yes, sir.
Everybody could articulate the problem, but when it comes down to solutions, that's
Amen.
when it becomes a challenge. And what happens is that there is more than one solution. For an example, we have individuals, because I believe you have to heal before you build. I believe that if you build on unstable foundation, then you're not going to have a good outcome. And so with the violence, you have to understand all of the variables that's involved in it.
Right, mom, dad, brother, sister, friends, neighbors, schools, churches,
right,
cousins.
Right. And not just that, we have to look at the fact that there are communities that is not being funded with adequate businesses. There's lack of supportive businesses. And, majority of the African American community where this violence and stuff is going on, the African Americans does not own their businesses. They have no ownership. And so those are issues that we have to address in order to get to the violence, because when you see the violence, those are symptoms of greater ills in the community.
Yeah, lack of jobs, depression.
Lack of jobs, lack of resources,
mental
lack
health
of
training.
mental health.
Absolutely.
Over-policing. And not saying that we don't need police, but we have to have a relationship with the police. Where when they do come into our community, they know who we're dealing with. They know what kind of mental state a person is in there. And so they want, people won't be forced to use over-aggressive forces with our brothers and sisters that suffer from mental health issues. We also have a educational system that we have to begin to look into, and redirecting our goals and our objectives, because the majority of the goals and objectives in the community is that you have been trained, you have been conditioned to work, get the education, get a good job. But you can't build generational wealth nor pass on any job to your children. You need to start developing businesses. And so at some point we have to start looking at businesses. And because if the people is out, it's a reason why people out there selling drugs. Everybody is not making a whole lot of money selling drugs. That's just not a reality. And so if we could hire people to start programs, hire them with the potential of learning how to run their own businesses, I think the narrative will begin to change. I believe that we could make a difference in people's lives.
I was blessed to be a part of Junior Achievement as a youth, actually, that gave that business model where you had corporate executives from various major companies, Fortune 500 companies, working with us, working with youth, high school students, and telling them how to manufacture and produce small things and get out and sell them. And they had a marketing department, et cetera. So you recreate those type of programs.
And we have to have those programs. And even for those that are not into the business, we have, I remember that there was a Washburn
Technical Center.
And so people was able to get trades, start their own businesses. If they started out of their garages and then eventually they went on to bigger and better things. But those opportunities are gone. There was a time when you could leave one job and go to the other job. Those opportunities are gone. And so we have to create opportunities where people can actually thrive. And they got to come from more than just, the churches, because after all of the grants is over with, after all of the money is spent, all of the people come to the church. They come to the church, and the church always have resources, food, clothing, different shelter to provide them. Mm-hmm. But when it comes down to focusing on churches is getting a bad name because they don't want to respect the powers that's coming out of the churches. But at the end of the day, it is the churches who stood up against a lot of the atrocities and a lot of political and social ills. It was the churches that actually made these movements possible. And so we have to begin to look at our resources. Most of the churches in the African American community, churches are owned by African Americans. They have their own boards and that's power. Ownership is power. And so we have to begin to broaden that beyond the churches and give people power of having ownership. I mean, just imagine living in your parents' house that they inherited to you, and you don't have to pay the $1,800, $2,300 a month. And all of that money that you earn, you can go invest that in more properties and build and build and build. And so if we focused on building a community and building ourselves, then that will curb some of the issues that's going on.
You just raised an interesting issue. A lot of youth are losing their parents' homes just because they don't pay their taxes, they don't pay their mortgage. So if we can actually encourage those youth to...
Well, there's a program called Live Free. Live Free is a social justice program, and they are coming into our communities, and they're coming into the churches to educate people on that very issue. I just left a meeting on yesterday, hosted by Anthony Spencer, Pastor Anthony Spencer, a longtime friend of mine, and he's always a progressive minister. They brought up some issues with these social justice program. It's called Live Free. And what they do is they come into the church, they set up and support the social justice ministries. Social justice ministry would be able to talk about what happens when your parent died, what happened in the here and now while they're still alive. What do you do as far as it will? How do you get the taxes? How do you adjust once you become transition from a regular citizen to a senior citizen? The tax bracket drop, But if people don't know this here, they don't know. And so you're spending way more money and you losing property just because you don't know. The word of God said, my people perish for the lack of knowledge.
How to go to the Cook County Assessor's office.
Right. And so those are things that people No.
And
Now,
apply for the senior exemption, apply for a homeowner's exemption.
absolutely, and that's your forte with your real estate history. Just teaching people what to you is common sense, but to us is foreign language because we don't know. And the reason why we don't know is because again, all of those property owners, all of those business owners, they are being pushed out into communities. And so now you have renters. And when you have renters, and their renters don't have the same mindset as
the
owners.
Absolutely.
And that's why a lot of the ball is getting dropped because that information is not being transferred to the generation that's coming behind us. And we have to take on some responsibility and accountability for not passing that information on. And that is one of my main motivations for being on the front line. We on the street corners. We right here and they selling drugs over there. But we talk to them people and then we ask them, questions.
So what do you say to people when you're walking around doing outreach out in the Madison?
Well, what I tell people is that I let them know, first of all, I let them know that God loves them. Mm-hmm. And He created you to be what He created you to be. And then I asked the question to them. I said, are you the best you that you can possibly be? And when they began to open up,
best you.
Yeah, the best you can possibly be. And then when they began to open up, then we began to dialogue. We began to encourage them. And then we began to introduce them to the resources. We have relationships with the Haymarkets. We have the relationship with the Gateways. We have the relationship with whatever treatment facility you need. We have relationships with shelters. We got relationship with job training. We got relationship with youth program and mental health programs. And so we just question, see, if I could talk to a person and just ask them basic questions, because life asks us 3 questions. Life asks everybody 3 questions, whether we ask them conscious of it or not. Who are you? What do you want? And how you going to get it? Those are the 3 questions that you ask. So when we're out there doing outreaches, we ask them, I say, are you being the best you that you could possibly be? And 99.9% of the times they say no. And so therefore, that's saying that they need some help.
Absolutely.
Because to just walk up to people and say you need some help, they're going to, man, go ahead on. But you got to challenge them. You can't be afraid of them. Young, old, whether they intoxicated or not. Are you being the best you that you could possibly be? And so when they say no, then you have to start focusing on the majority of the people suffer from lack of identity. They don't know who they are. They don't know who they are. They don't know what their capabilities are. And so we help and we assist in that struggle with the identity.
For the next couple of minutes, talk about parents that have lost their kids. How you feel.
Wow. Majority of the parents who lost their children, in my experiences, I have a brother whose son was murdered. I had a sister whose son died by, they put something in his drink or his weed or whatever, and he eventually started hallucinating and he committed suicide. And they changed. I know my brother's health even started changing. His behavior started changing. His will to live. He wasn't, something happened. When a parent loses a child, a part of the parent dies because it is so unnatural for a parent to lose their child. I've counseled some and vast majority of them had suicidal ideations.
The parents.
Afterwards. Yeah, afterwards. Wow. They had suicidal ideations. And their will to live, they could not work and concentrate on the things, just everyday tasks, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't do the very things that people do normally. After a year or 2 years ago, all of those on the outside looking in say, man, you should be over this by now, but you're not. It takes time, it takes years, it takes, sometimes it takes therapy to deal with this. It takes a support system, some people that you can talk to about some of the same things that you talked about last year, and won't be tired of listening to you because they understand. And those who don't understand, and I don't totally understand it, but what I do is I'm willing to be able to sit and talk with these people and connect them with people who had shared experience in home for them. So we just provide a space, a place for that supportive system to operate from.
Let's chat for a moment about harm reduction and how do you reduce the anger? How do you get
harm reduction is a big word.
Conflict resolution.
Conflict resolution. Okay. Conflict resolution is again, it goes back to identity.
Gun violence prevention.
Yeah. People have to understand, first of all, who they are, and then who you are, who the next individual are, because there's a higher self and then there's a lower self, and the lower self will engage in conflict, where the higher self will engage in conflict resolution. The lower self will operate out of anger, where the higher self will operate out of love. The lower self will operate out of all of those derogatories, where the higher self will operate out of love, peace, harmony, brotherly love, respect for not just self, but for all, and anybody that you see in conflict, we engage in them. I was yesterday, the guy was real angry at me. He was just an aggressive guy, and there was a lady and a child on the bus stop, and I, stopped to check and see was she all right. But kind of find out they was together, and he really had some words for me, So I just, remove myself from the situation and realize that those are some of the things that we have to do. We have to begin to confront these situations and not worry about, what's going to happen to you. Just like the story of the, you had what they call a Good Samaritan. He wasn't concerned about what was going to happen to him. He was more concerned about what was going to happen to the man if I didn't go down there, And so, because they beat him to death, robbed him, and left him for dead, and all of the priests and the lawyers and everybody else walked past him But the Good Samaritan went to him and said, "Well, hey, I got to help him."
I hear you loud and clear. So Lawndale Lighthouse has God's Miracles meetings every Thursday at 6 p.m., parent healing groups every third Wednesday at 6 p.m. at God's Miracle Outreach Ministry. And that address again, Pastor Crawford.
Well, the address is 1252 South on Pulaski. And if you flip on the side, we have
Roosevelt and Harding?
No, there's Roosevelt and that's Pulaski and 13th. 1252 South Pulaski. And so on the other side here, we have a 3-day. We're having a 3-day. Revival. Friday, we're going to be on the inside of 1240, and we're going to have a prayer worship service for the leaders. Then Saturday, we're walking up and down the street, and we invite.
Pulaski?
Yeah, 1240 on Friday at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
And then 10 o'clock morning Saturday, we're going to be walking up and down the street, north, south, east, and west of Pulaski and Roosevelt. We're going to have a tent out there. We're going to have music, food. We're going to have bouncing houses, and we're going to have snowballs and just a whole plethora of gifts and activities for the children. But then after they get finished with the outreach, they're coming back to the corner of Roosevelt and Pulaski, and we're going to engage in worship and deliverance service. And then Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, we're going to have worship service. And then I'll be closing out that service with the preaching experience through the Holy Spirit. Yeah.
You're definitely one of God's miracles, Pastor Crawford.
Well, come on,
Brother Eric.
Man. Yes, sir. Yes,
Eric
sir.
Stith, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for the invite. I appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to just let people know that there is a solution and there is help, and we are open and willing to help, and we're there for you guys.
Additionally, a Hand Up Recovery located at 4032 West Van Buren. Our program's open 5 o'clock Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays. Stop by and ask for help. We can help you. Thanks for listening.